let's stop the second biggest leak. In fact, some people's biggest, and that is accommodation. So in terms of housing, the question is, should you buy, should you rent, or should you hack? Now, some people don't even know that third option. So you got to choose what buys your freedom faster. That's what I would say anyway. Your home is your biggest lifestyle choice, and often your biggest money leak, especially after taxes. So let's stop thinking rent versus buy and start thinking cleverly. What is the total cost of shelter, TCOS for short, and what is the freedom per dollar? Then I'll show you the hacks that turn a home into a helper. So the big idea is, forget just asking, can I afford the mortgage? Use the total cost of shelter, TCOS. This covers your mortgage, which is like your principal that you're paying down to own the place, plus the interest the bank is charging you, or it could be the rent if you're renting. There's taxes if you own, there's insurance. You'll actually also pay insurance if you're a renter, usually renter's insurance. There's a HOA or homeowners association dues if you're living in a homeowners association. There's also maintenance if you're an owner, right? And maintenance typically 1, sometimes 2% of the value of the home per year. Expect to pay about that. There's also the utilities. Now, utilities you'll pay either way. There's also closing or selling costs if you buy a home, and you can amortize or basically break that down over the life of your loan, let's say 30 years. But you also should subtract, and here's what's sometimes missing. If you are able to house hack or rent hack, you're able to subtract income. Maybe you've got extra people living with you, right? Maybe you're sharing part of the accommodation, right? And they're paying your rent, if you own a place in particular. So compare that all to the rent plus the renter's insurance if you're actually renting, and also expect you will pay rent increases. As you rent, it typically goes up over time, usually between 2 and 4%. And don't forget the opportunity cost of your down payment. So if you're plugging in a lot of money to buy that house first, you could have put that somewhere else and earned it elsewhere, right? That cash could have earned it elsewhere. So let's look at this thing. I like to call it the 4+1 test. This is your fast decision filter. Number 1, the time test. Will you stay at least 7 years? Now, round trip costs are real, like buying and selling, the fees, like for buying and selling properties, but also moving either way and making a place ready. If you're not likely to stay for 7 years, renting usually wins unless you can house hack, which we'll discuss soon. So that's the time test, 7 years. 2, price to rent test. So here we're going to take the home price and divide by the annual rent for a comparable place. If that ratio is under 18 to 20, so the price is pretty cheap relative to the rent, then buying is usually what's going to work, at least in dollar terms. Whereas if the ratio is higher than 22 or 25, that means the price is probably pretty expensive or the rent is pretty cheap. So the renting usually wins on a dollar term. Now, again, this is a screen. It's not a verdict. You want to layer it with the other tests. The third test is the liquidity test. So after your down payment, your closing costs, do you still have maybe 6 months of personal runway, not counting retirement accounts? If not, you may need to rent or buy something smaller. A house without a cash cushion becomes a stress machine. Fourth, you want to look at something called the stability or optionality test. So here we're thinking about jobs, relationships, your location. Like, are these stable? How stable are they? If they're very stable, buying gets easier. If they're not that stable, then it's difficult, right? Because you might expect career jumps, relocation, or you might just love flexibility. If that's the case, then you might want to rent. Only buy if you can get your house to cash flow via a hack, which we'll talk about very, very soon. Now, here's something that very few people consider, and I want to give this as a big value added in this video. This is what I'm going to call the +1, the 4.5, step 4.5. This is called the rental backstop test. You want to buy early like an investor. So if I had to move in 12 to 24 months, 1 to 2 years, could this place work as a rental if I use conservative numbers? So simply how to run it. First, we're going to look at finding the realistic market rate for comparables. Look at other properties, see what the rents are on those properties, if they're similar bed count, bath count, space, etc., square footage, etc., in the local market. Second is we're going to compute what is known as your net operating income. It's just the difference between your rent and then all the costs. So you want to look at vacancy. So when you're not renting it, usually 5 to 8%. Maintenance costs or capital expenditures, roof, etc., usually 8 to 10% of the rent. Management fees, I'm getting 5%, but I'm lucky in one regards. 8 to 10% even if you self-manage. You want to price in your time. You don't want to work for free. Also add up your principal, interest, tax and insurance and your homeowners association. So use your actual owner-occupier stuff here. So, think about the payment and also sanity check everything. So add a 1% interest just as an investor-related stress, because usually it's like 1%, can typically be 1% higher if you're taking out investor loans. Now, your debt service coverage ratio, you want to make sure that you're covering the net operating income, but make sure that you adjust this for your PITI, your principal, interest, tax, insurance, usually your mortgage. That's your mortgage. The PITI is typically your mortgage. And that is the cost of your mortgage. That's usually what you're paying every month. And your homeowner association, if you are in a homeowner association, usually condos, stuff like that, townhomes, things like that. Sometimes they have HOAs. If this service ratio is bigger than 1.1, pass. This is safe to buy to rent as a fallback. If it's less than 1, I think you'd probably fail. You'd be subsidizing it. So it's probably better to rent or maybe buy a smaller property or consider house hacking to jack those numbers up in your favor of buying. If it passes the rental backstop, you don't need 7 years to win. This is what I do. I typically move into a place, I move out of it after a year or 2 years. You can buy now, live in it, convert it later without bleeding cash. If the test fails, then just consider renting right now or hacking a cheaper buy until the maths works. Now, just a little compliance nudge here. Make sure if you're buying it as an owner-occupier that you do indeed intend to occupy as the loan requires. So that's usually 12 months. At least you must live there for at least 12 months. If you do convert it from an owner-occupier to a rental, then you're going to have to switch to landlord insurance, right? And you also want to check your homeowners association, HOA, as well as any rental caps. There could be some restrictions. And just keep a good capital exchange reserve. So if it passes at least 3 of the first 4 tests and it passes the 4.5, the backstop test, then you might want to consider buying or home or house hacking. If it fails 2 or more or the backstop fails, then you may want to rent smartly or you may want to buy something much smaller and hack. Now, there's 2 winning paths, just so that, you cannot choose the wrong path. The first would be rent smart. When tests are saying, not yet, don't buy just yet. One thing you can do is negotiate a renewal before the peak season. Usually, again, depends on the area. In some places, the peak season, if it's college area, maybe it's around about like August, September. So, you're not going to, good luck trying to get a good deal around that time of the year. In some places, it's usually around about March, that kind of time, March, April. Usually December for most places, January for most places. Usually that's a really cold time. So if you can renew around then, you'll probably get a good deal, if you're allowed to. Another thing to do to get a good deal is offer a longer term for a lower rate. Look, I'll stay with you for 2 years, let's say, something like that. You could usually get, I have done that before. Again, I'm talking from experience here, and I was able to save. It was going to go up by $100, but I negotiated it to go up by $50 the first year and the $50 the second year. You can rent hack. This is where, again, you need to check the local rules, but you might get a roommate. You might have an in-law suite, something like that. You might furnish a room, and you might get, because you found a place, you might get your roommate to pay you, and then basically you're renting from a landlord, so you might split the cost, and that way you've actually lowered the overall cost completely, right? So you're no longer, if you're renting a place, you're renting the whole place out for yourself, like renting a slightly bigger place that has 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms. Now you've put someone else in the other bedroom. Again, you must check your local rules, must get permission, must ask your landlord, make sure, like I'm not saying do things that are dodgy, do this the legit way, but rent hacking is a legit way as long as you have permission. If they don't allow you, move on, find another place. Another thing you can do is banking the difference, right, between owning and renting. Invest it. If you are renting and it would cost you more to own, look at the difference and see if you can put that difference into a bank and invest it. The optionality that you can do that and that you've got flexibility, that is a real asset. Now, another thing to do is to buy smart. If the tests are saying go, like buy, then remember just to keep your total cost of shelter no more than about 30% or a third of your after-tax income. Again, this might be more doable if you can hack the income and you can actually increase that, because it would lower your total cost of shelter, or you could look at it also as increasing your take-home income if you can hack them, if it's applicable. Budget 1 to 2% a year of the value of the property. If it's 500,000, budget 5,000 in terms of maintenance or capital expenditures. So maybe repairing roof eventually at some point, systems like even things like your water heater, things like that. Prefer a fixed rate, something like a 30-year fixed rate. It's boringly great for location. You want something really boring, but it's a great location, and something that's easy to resell. Great locations have easier. There's a reason they say location, location, location. It's easy to resell. You usually get good clients or tenants eventually if you do rental. It's usually got solid appreciation. You're not going to necessarily get massive cap rates or cash on cash or great rental returns, but you'll have something solid, and that solidity builds your wealth, and you don't pay tax while you own the property. Before you sell it, you're able to basically enjoy the value of your home going up without paying tax. Bad neighborhoods, bad locations, your house won't go up nearly as much, typically speaking, as a good location. Now, there are exceptions, but that's usually when a bad location becomes a good location. Let's say gentrification, things like that, right, that weren't planned beforehand or that you would have known about, or maybe you got lucky. Another thing to do if you own is house hack. If you've got a duplex, that's a 2-unit building, or above, a triplex, that's 3 units, or a quadplex, 4 units, etc. Or you have an ADU, an additional dwelling unit. Maybe you have a converted garage, right? Maybe you have a room rental. If there's any space that you can rent, even seasonally, as long as you make sure you're doing this all with local compliance, right, legal, but a small hack can swing the math massively. It could be you've got a bit of a commercial place below the building and you've bought the place and you can rent it out, etc. Whatever you can do. You've got a garage, you rent the garage out, so the garage, you rent the garage out, and the garage, someone can use the garage, things like that. But a small hack can swing the maths massively. So the smart compare, just a quick example again, we're looking at same neighborhood, we're going to look at buying versus renting. Suppose you could buy a $500,000 home, put 20% down, it's $100,000. That's a 30-year fixed mortgage. Now, the payment, that's the principal plus the interest, let's say it's X dollars. The tax, the insurance, the homeowners association, let's say it's Y dollars. The maintenance, usually 1 to 2%, I think 1.5% average of your price per year. That's the property price. So 1% of that, 1.5% of that, that's about $7,500. If 5,000 is 1%, 7,500 is 1.5% per year. That works out to be about $625 a month. So your total cost of shelter before hacking it is all these ones added up. X, which is your payment, Y, which is again your tax, insurance, homeowner association, maintenance as well. Make sure that you include that. That's your $625. That's your total cost of shelter per month. Now, the opportunity cost to go further is, well, you put $100,000 down and you could have been putting that in the stock market or somewhere else, right? You could have earned 5%, 6%, 7%, you name it, elsewhere. So we'll call that about $400 to $600 a month of foregone return if you had taken that $100,000 and put it somewhere else to make that. Now, when you're looking at rent, you want to, compare this at, let's say, $3,000 a month. That's a comparable one, let's say. And with renter's insurance, if you were renting, you'd be paying, let's say, $15 a month. That's just an example. Expect about a 3% a year rise. So next year it might go up to $3,090, for instance. Now, there's a house hack twist here. This is what I love. You convert, let's say you've got a garage or an additional dwelling unit or ADU, or you get an extra room that you're not using to bring a little bit better, right? To make maybe an extra $900 a month. And this could be like, as long as it's compliant, right? We're going to call this compliant income, right? So that you're not doing it illegally. Well, now your total cost of shelter has dropped by $900. I love this. This is what I try to do. Suddenly, buying might beat renting, even after counting maintenance and opportunity costs. Run the full monthly, including maintenance and the foregone return on your down payment. Then subtract hack income. If the buy is cheaper and you pass the tests, then buy. If not, then rent and keep the option to move fast when life changes. I go in and out of these situations like that all the time. Right now, when I'm recording this video, I'm currently renting, but I'm about to buy and house hack and even go all the way down to even hacking some of the rooms and having short term in one of the two of the rooms like that while I live in the same place. So, I adopt all these strategies depending on my time. Right now I'm renting, and that was for personal reasons, flexibility in between. So let's do a smart comparison with some pro moves. I want to show you guys why investor maths often favors buying. Okay, now this is if you really want to crank up, and this is what I'm all about, right? Is like building your path to wealth. It's actually better. Real estate is actually better almost to an extent the poorer you are, right? This is how to get wealthy quicker, not fast, not get rich quick. But this is a really, if you understand it, it does take more work. It's not for everybody, right? But if you were willing to tap into it, this is why it works. If you're not, stock market's going to put you ahead of everyone. Easy, stress-free life, you're doing amazing. You're ahead of most people by just doing that. But the real estate, for those that are trying to climb even faster. So let's look at some investor maths here to show why buying usually dominates. 30-year versus 15-year mortgage. Time value and optionality. A 30-year fixed is a permission slip to keep payments low. The hurdle is lower at the 30 per month because it's split out over a longer period. Yeah, you're paying more interest. Yeah, the cost goes up, but look at it the monthly for a second. You can always pay it off quickly. You can always prepay it fast. There's usually no prepayment penalty. You can check with the lender. So you can simulate a 15-year thing by paying extra, but you're never obligated to. So if you lose your job and you can't make up the higher monthly, you're not out of luck. If your realistic after-tax return on investment, let's say your business or index funds, whatever you're investing in, if that exceeds your after-tax mortgage rate, because again, you might be paying 7%, but maybe you're getting deductions and write-offs, and so it's really just 6%. So look at the after-tax, 6%. Well, if your return is 8% in the stocks versus 6% here, you might as well just not worry about it too much. The 30-year plus invest the spread, that's the extra 2%, that usually beats a forced 15-year rate. Now, discipline check, set up auto invest for the difference. Now, why is it that I've only put 5% down and 10% down. I've never put 20% down in properties. Why is it that some people put less down? Why is it smarter? And PMI can be too. So less down means lower opportunity cost and more liquidity. I can keep the other cash, grow it in the stock market, get my returns. Yes, you'll pay the private mortgage insurance, PMI. If you're on an FHA, it's called MIP. But it's cancelable on a conventional mortgage, right? It's often, and by the way, it's tiny. It's like usually, again, it varies. Usually 0.3 to 1%, can be a little higher, can be a bit lower, but 0.3 to 1% of the loan. So if you were paying, let's say it was 0.5. So if you're paying 6.25, now it's gone up to 6.75. That's it. And it can fall off, usually around 80%. So if you put in, let's say, a 5% down, once you own 20%, either the market has gone up or you've basically paid that much off. Well, in that case, by scheduling or getting a new appraisal after the value has been added, so you could even force, in my case, I took fixer-upper properties, I did them up, almost like flipping them straight away. I went back to the mortgage companies and I got them to reappraise. And they said, oh, your house is worth almost twice, or your house has gone up by 100,000. Oh, you now own a greater percentage of the house because the house is worth so much more. The loan represents such a small, now we'll wipe off that extra PMI payment. So I got in for very little dollars, did a bit of work on it, and then all of a sudden I wiped off the PMI, got the same rate as if I had put down tens of thousands of dollars more. And it takes a long time for a lot of people to save up tens of thousands. You don't need to do that. That ongoing PMI cost, it's frequently smaller than the return that you give up by parking an extra 50 or 100,000 into a down payment. And by the way, if you are getting an FHA loan, the MIP will stick for the life of that loan unless you refi out. You get another loan to replace it. So you basically use another loan to pay off that loan, and that way you snip it in the bud, you get rid of the MIP. Now, principal, the actual principal, is not a cost. A lot of people think, oh, I'm paying a mortgage and I'm paying the two numbers, rent versus mortgage. Part of that mortgage is literally you saving. It's going into your principal. So your P&I, or principal interest payment, has interest. That is a cost. And principal, but that's the equity that you keep. So in the terms of the total cost of shelter, focus on the interest and the taxes and the insurance, not on the principal. Also, of course, you want to focus on the homeowners association fees, if you have any of that, maintenance, and the opportunity cost, of course, of the trapped equity when you plug that money into the house, the down payment. But the principal that you're paying down, that's a transfer to you. Like you're owning more and more of that property over time, as well as any benefits from any appreciation, either the market or that you've forced it because you've done it up and now it's worth more because it's much nicer than it was when you came in first. Forced appreciation, I mentioned this a few times, so this is what I love. You control the difference or the change, or in finance, the delta. You cannot force a landlord to renovate, but you can improve your own place. So smart budgeted upgrades like the kitchens, baths, systems, the curb appeal, things like this, a little bit of paint job, floors, kitchen, things like the countertops, some of the appliances like the lighting, the doorknobs, the hardware. These can raise the value and or the rental potential. Just make sure to keep the permits and receipts, because any capital improvements that you make, they add to the basis, right? And that reduce taxable gains later. Now, hack the taxes when you rent parked or you later convert. So you might be renting a room or an additional dwelling unit, or even more, you might be looking at one unit of a 2 to 4. So I have a duplex, I'm also getting into a quadplex right now, like a 4-unit building. You might be renting out those other units while you live in one. So you can typically deduct the pro rata, so that percentage of the property, the share of the interest. If you're living in a 4-unit property, you live in one, you rent the other 3, that means 3/4. You can be deducting the interest, the taxes, 3/4 of that, the insurance, the repairs, etc. And as well as that, you can depreciate the rented portion. So huge amount, it's fantastic. Real estate, so many things under the water level, right? The iceberg, there's so much more below the water that we don't see up front. So short-term rentals, by the way, they do have special rules, so make sure you follow the local law and keep very clean records. A modest, compliant hack can flip the buy versus rent decision decisively. Renting is a lifestyle win sometimes, but buying with skill, here we have a 30-year optionality, because you can always go from 30 to 15. You've got smart down payment. You've, putting in less. You've value add options. You can force appreciation, even like a light cosmetic renovation, or even a light house hack where you're renting one of the bedrooms even. That usually dominates financially. If you won't use these levers, or they fail the rental backstop, just not a good area for rental, then consider renting for now and keep your capital working elsewhere. Maybe it's in the stock market or somewhere else. But there's numbers and there's also psychology. Buying can feel like I made it. Renting can feel temporary. So you may want to flip that script. Stability comes from a strong balance sheet and low stress, not just a deed. If buying raises your total cost of ownership so much that you lose flexibility or sleep, it slows your freedom. Now, just remember those pro moves, like making sure you have that interest rate reality, like don't buy a payment hoping to refinance. Buy a house you can afford today. Treat any future refinance at a different interest rate as an upside, not a plan. Interest rates may come down, but don't plan for that. In terms of your down payment strategy, look, a bigger down lowers the payment, but it does raise the opportunity cost, because you could be taking some of that money and growing it. If your investments or your business reliably beat your mortgage rate, consider not over down payment. If you still pass the liquidity test, make sure you do. Now, in terms of closing and selling friction, because you do have a lot of closing costs, the buying costs, the title, transfer, points, selling costs, usually 5 to 8% in terms of agents and other fees. This is why the time test typically matters. That's why I said around 7 years. Taxes, you want to keep it practical. Don't overestimate the mortgage interest deduction. You might actually think you're getting a bigger deduction than you are. Many households don't itemize, or they're limited by SALT, the state and local taxes caps. As an owner-occupier, you live in the building, capital gains exclusions can be powerful later. If you live there 2 of the last 5 years, then you get that. There are some rules that apply, but the Section 121 exclusion can shield up to $250,000 or even $500,000 of gains. Now, for investment properties, if you've got a rental property, consider a 1031 exchange. That can defer capital gains when you sell and buy something that's similar. Not for a primary residence, but it is relevant if you can convert a rental first. This is quite advanced in terms of timing. There's mixed-use combinations that exist, but you're going to save that for a deeper dive. Keep it high integrity, though. Make sure that you know your local landlord, your short-term, and your tax rules. In terms of risk management, remember an emergency fund should be separate from your closing cash. Okay, it's not for your closing cash. Don't count on appreciation to bail you out of too tight a buy. An insurance rise, right? If you're thinking about it, make sure that you know your flood and your wind risk. The hacks ladder, let's have a look at that. So the rent hacking, again, you could have a roommate, maybe an in-law, or any kind of person you want, friend, etc., that's staying there. Make sure that it's compliant as a room rental. So on the lighter side of this, house hack light, let's call it, we're going to own a single family home. And this could be an apartment, this could be a townhouse, this could be an actual single family detached home, whatever. But you're going to legally rent out some of the bedrooms, as long as it's more than one bedroom, right? It's going to be a little sticky if it's not one bedroom, right? Unless you're having a bunk bed or something that you're in college, like that kind of thing. But legally, you're going to rent out the bedrooms. Or maybe you have an ADU. It could be like you have a garage, and that garage, you can rent out the garage for storage space in the neighborhood, etc. So people can use it for storage space, things like that. Now, you can do that, or occasionally, maybe having a compliant, like a short-term rental, right? Instead of long-term, maybe do like Airbnb one of the bedrooms in your property. So, you're living in a 2-bed, you bought a 2-bed home, Airbnb one of the 2 bedrooms. As long as it's legal, you hopefully should be able to really reduce the cost, even make it cash flow positive. You may be even actually getting paid to live. Now, the next level up, so I've done the House Hack Lite, but the next level up, House Hack Pro, I've done this too. This is a 2 to 4 unit building where you got owner-occupant financing. This is the best leverage. You get lower interest rates, longer terms, better credit situations whatsoever. It's much better. You qualify for more. You can put down more as well, so you can buy more. You live in one unit, you rent the other units. Duplex, I rented the other unit, lived in one. Quadplex, I'm moving into right now. Fourplex, I'm going to live in one, rent the other 3 out. So you rent the others out to your neighbors or your tenants, and their tenants help you pay the mortgage. So you live for free. Now, there is another one. This is a live-in, then rent conversion. So you might buy as an owner-occupier. I've done this too. And then you move later. So I bought a single family. I moved a year later, and I kept that single family as a rental. Now, you want to mind your loan occupancy rules. So you must live there typically at least a year. Also make sure the insurance does change. No longer a regular, now it becomes an actual, like a landlord, like a proper policy. And also your local regulation in terms of if they have any limits to the rent that you can charge, if they don't allow short-term rentals, etc. So check in with all of this. There's finally a geo hack. So this is what's called rent where you work, and then buy a rental where numbers make sense. In fact, to think about it, I do. Currently, when I'm recording this video, I actually am. I'm renting right now at the time of recording, but I also have bought and own right now rentals, right? It just makes sense for me temporarily to do this. Now, your glide path is what it's called. It's how fast, right? That's like the aircraft analogy earlier on. Remember, we're clearing the runway, right? Clear the runway. That's like getting rid of the debt, getting into an airplane. The glide path, how fast your net worth climbs towards freedom. The sky is the limit. But if you lower your total cost of shelter, you increase your savings rate, and you reduce the number of years you have until financial independence. So if you do buy a place that can help pay you. If you do rent in a way that helps you, your glide path, like really structure it so that you can save and invest more each month. Just keep an eye on the prize. The net worth, is it adding to it or is it taking from it? So, quick decision grid. Are we staying at least 7 years? Is the price to rent under 20? Do you have at least 6 months more in cash left after closing? Is your career location stable, or will you be house hacking or hacking income somehow? If there's 3 or 4 yeses, then buy it. By all means, buy it or house hack. If there's less than 2 yeses, probably, or only 2 yeses, you may want to rent smart and stack cash in the meantime. So don't ask just rent or buy. Ask which option gives me the lower total cost of shelter and the most freedom. If it passes the 4 tests, use the hacks and make your home, whether it's owned or rented, accelerate your timeline, not slow it. And I want to just add this little thing, a bit like a Marvel movie that has a little ending at the end, like a 1-minute clip. Real estate can outrun stocks. You heard that right. Why can real estate build faster early on, in particular, when you're first starting out? 4 engines: leverage, cash flow, amortization, and tax. So leverage with 20% down in a $400,000 property, a 5% rise is 20K. You put down 80K, you got 20K back. That 5% was really 25%. Huge before cost, of course. Cash flow. If you've bought a well-bought unit, they're going to basically produce a monthly surplus if you've bought right. And that monthly surplus allows you extra income that you can channel to buy into more and more assets. Amortization, so your loan over time, the tenants are going to pay down your principal, right? So the amortization, every month you're paying more towards your principal, what you've borrowed, and less towards interest. So your tenants are paying this down if you rent it out. So your equity is going to rise more and faster and faster and faster, even if the price is flat, even if the house price doesn't increase. Every month, you're owning more and more of the house. So your equity or assets go up, your net wealth, which is what we're aiming for, right? That goes up. And finally, tax. Depreciation can shelter some of your cash flow, even from other income. Interest or other expenses, they can be deductible for the rented portion if you're renting part or all of your house. Okay, in guardrails, only count on this if the purchase passes a rental backstop. Conservative debt service coverage ratio at least 1.1, and you keep at least 6 months in reserves. Otherwise, stocks may be safer and simpler.